All right, my name is James Lee. Let's talk about configuring the bash shell. So as always, if you have any comments, please use that comments question box. So let's get started talking about configuring the bash shell. So first we'll talk about bash variables. Then we'll talk about environment variables. We'll talk about aliases. It's basically a way to create your own commands to do something else. We'll talk about startup and exit scripts. And then finally, a little introduction to shell scripting, very briefly. So first, bash variables. So we can create variables in bash. By convention, this is just by convention, variables are named all uppercase. They don't have to be, but like I said, by convention they are. So when we assign a variable, when we create one and give it a value, we do not use the $sign, but when we take the value, we do use the $sign. It's kind of weird at first, but here's an example. Here we assign name, the string John space Doe, and notice when we make the assignment to name, first of all we see name is all uppercase. Again, that's by convention. So name is the variable, John space Doe is the value. And when we make the assignment, notice that there's no $sign used. But when we take the value and we do an echo $name, we see the value printed as standard out there. So we see when we do an echo hi $name, notice that $name is replaced with the variable name's value, John space Doe. So we can have what are known as environment variables. So when the shell starts, the shell has certain variables set, and these are called environment variables. And these variables are passed on to every program that's run in the shell. And thus you can use them in shell scripts and other programs or what have you. If you want to see a list of the environment variables set in your shell, just fire up the shell and enter print env or simply env with no argument. So here's an example. We do a print env and we see the variable host name is set and here's its value. The variable term is set, shell, and so on. There'll be a long list of variables displayed. Now if you'd like to see the variables displayed in sorted order, simply pipe the output through sort. So here I do a print env pipe through sort, and now we see it come out in sorted order. So here are some common environment variables you might find. Home is the user's home directory. Path is the user's path. The path is a list of directories that are searched when you run an executable program. So if you ever type ls in the shell, it has to know where to find ls, and that is because /bin directory is in your path. User is the user's name. Mail is where the user's email spool file, that's where all your inbound email is kept. Shell is the user's shell, like /bin/bash. Term is the user's terminal type, like xterm or some such. Pager is the preferred way to page through a file, either more or less or something else. Editor is your preferred editor, like Vim, Pico, or, dare I say, Emacs. And you can echo out those variables if you want. So if you say echo $home, you'll see your home environment variable. And again, every shell or program that you execute in the shell has these variables given to it. They're called environment variables. Now you can create your own environment variables, simply assign them a value. So if I say Java home equals opt packages JDK5, and then echo Java home, there it is. Now to make this variable available in subsequent shells or programs, the variable must be what's called exported. So prior to exporting the variable, it's only available in the current shell. But when you export it, that makes it available in the successive shells. And you do that by typing export and then the variable name. And that means the shells that are created henceforth will have that variable as well. You can also assign and export at the same time. Here we do an export Java home equals, and that assigns Java home and exports at the same time. You can create what are called aliases. These are like creating new commands or giving commands new behavior. So if you type the alias command in your shell, you'll see what your current aliases are. Here we see that L dot is an alias for ls minus d dot star color minus color tty. That's basically going to look at everything that are directories within the current directory. LL does an ls minus L, turning the color on. LS, we're doing a normal LS, but we're putting the assigning the color tty. And here we're aliasing VI to be Vim. So every time we VI a file, we're actually using the Vim editor, not the VI editor. So we're using VI improved. So when we do an L dot, notice it shows all the hidden files and directories. So I do an L dot, and you see all those hidden files and directories displayed. Try LL. This does an ls minus L for us automatically. So here's how you create an alias. You simply say alias. The new alias's name, that's me, in this case me, equals, and then what you want it to be. So if I say alias me, who am I, and then I look at my aliases again, notice here's my alias me right here. So when I execute me, it's just like executing who am I, JDO in this case. Now let's talk about the bash profile. So when a user logs in, there's a special file in their home directory called .bash_profile. And this file is executed when a user logs in, so it's a great place to put environment variables that you need for your purposes, for your work purposes. So in that file, you might add like an export my name equals John Doe. Then the next time the user logs in, that environment variable would be set, inherited by the shell, and passed along to any subsequent shells or programs. So here, as an example, I'm going to do an SSH to some machine, execute, enter my password, echo my $name, and I get John Doe. So notice I log into that machine. Upon logging in, I execute the .bash profile. It sets the variable. I echo the variable out, and there it is. So these lines are commonly found in bash profile. The first is setting up your path. So let's say I have a bin directory in my home directory that I want to add the executable files to my current path. I would say path equals $path : and then my bin directory. Then export my path, and it's ready for any subsequent processes. So add variable assignments to the file as needed. Here's some examples. I'm assigning Java home, Java source, assigning my editor to be VI. Another use of bash profiles is to include programs that execute when the user logs in. Like for instance, this executes -bin, that's in my bin directory, in my home directory. It executes the receive to-do list from boss program, and then it executes fortune. Fortune is a famous program that shows your fortune for the day. So every time you log in, it would execute those two programs because they exist in your bash profile. Then there's bash rc. So that's another place where variables and programs are executed. It's similar to bash profile, but bash rc is executed every time a new shell is started. So when you start a new bash shell, it runs bash rc. So here's an example. I'll echo this text, temp equals orary, into .bash rc, echo $temp, run bash. That starts up a new bash shell, and notice that echo that $temp has been set. So bash rc is executed every time a new shell is executed. And then bash logout is a script that's executed when a user logs out of the system. So this one says echo leaving now. So when the user logs out, we see the user type exit. Here's the content of the bash logout file, and then it closes down the connection. So you can put whatever you need to put into this file to execute when the user logs out of the system. So there's a lot of different files that bash looks in when you log in. If you search for the invocation section of the bash man page, you'll learn all about the differences between them. So you can check those out. So it's lab time, so why don't we execute the following commands. Make sure you understand what they're doing. So make sure you can follow along and figure out why you get the output that you get. Do the same thing here. And number 3, modify the bash profile to set a variable that contains your name. Log out, log back in, verify the variable has been set. So if you have any questions, please fill out that question in the comment box. Thanks for listening.